Greetings and salutations. Welcome again to another episode of the Two Films Podcast. David here, and joining me today is a very special guest. We have Nicholas Kringle.
Hello, hello.
How you doing, Nick?
Fabulous.
Excited to talk about these two movies?
Yeah, it's been a minute since I've seen them, so it's kind of fun to review them again.
Yeah. The first one was definitely a blast from the past for me. I hadn't watched the second one all the way through.
Yeah, I forgot that both of them too also were not in English order, so you have to do subtitles or work on your foreign language.
Yeah,
understand
that is kind of funny though. I wasn't really thinking about it. It just kind of worked out that way.
Yeah.
And both are foreign language films. But yeah, so today's episode is two Mel Gibson films, and the films we're doing are The Passion of the Christ and Apocalypto. All right, so yeah, I guess we'll just get right into it. So, first film, Passion of the Christ, released in 2004, depicts the final 12 hours in the life of Jesus of Nazareth on the day of his crucifixion in Jerusalem, directed by Mel Gibson, written by Benedict Fitzgerald and Mel Gibson, starring Jim Caviezel, Monica Bellucci, and Maya Morgenstern. All right. So yeah, what's your general thoughts on this movie?
General thoughts, this is really good. I like that it gives a visual kind of for, what a lot of people, experience or read in the Bible through the, again, the Passion of the Christ. And it kind of hits it home, I think, for a lot of people. Because again, I feel like a lot of people, you read through it, especially like if you're growing up in the church and you understand it, but to kind of actually physically see it, I think it's just so much more impactful. And yeah, that's kind of my general thing with it. Overall, I really like the film. Is that it is definitely a little graphic for those who are a little squeamish, but no. But I think again, the other part of it, which I really liked, and which I really kind of noticed even more this time, was how kind of intentional every single shot is, and it just has that feel too of the importance of every single shot and all that.
Yeah, this I feel like is kind of an answer to all those Jesus films that came before it that were just, not very good.
Yeah.
In one way or another, they were just not very good, not very well made, and well, Mel Gibson knocked it out of the park with this one. I would have to say this is a very well-crafted film. It's not like entertaining like a normal sense of a film, but at the same time, the way the plot moves in a way that it kind of keeps you engaged as well. So it has that sort of quality where it's not a fun movie, but at the same time, you don't really want to look away either.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the interesting things, again, I took from it this time, because I've only seen the movie probably like 3 or 4 times, and I think it's partially because, like we were talking about, where it's more of like an intense, it's not like you necessarily watch it for entertainment value, and so it's not something you go, oh, I feel like sitting here and just, relaxing and watching Passion of the Christ, it's something that actually, like, it speaks to you, and it's very intentional in getting the message across of it, and it's not just something you could just kind of sit there and days through or whatever. It draws you in, and it's just very intense.
Yeah, this is I feel like this is one of those like almost like bucket list films. Like you got to just make sure you watch it at least once just to experience it, but like you maybe don't want to like put it on like, every weekend or whatever.
Yeah. It's definitely much more intentional. Like, say, someone's kind of in the mood, or you want a reality check in some ways, again, to kind of fresh, to bring it back again into perspective, because maybe you got too complacent with it or whatever,
Yeah, I will say too that this film kind of mostly delivers on the authenticity front. Like, I mean, so I wasn't sure at first when we watched it before, but so apparently this film is actually mostly in Aramaic.
Okay.
So I wasn't sure if they just like kind of cheated and like used modern Hebrew or something like that.
Okay.
But they actually, yeah, most of the film is in Aramaic, which would have been the language that was spoken in the area that Jesus lived by the Jewish people at the time. And yeah, everything looks like it's supposed to, aside from a few um like small details here and there.
Yeah.
Like I guess the segmented armor that the Roman soldiers wear, like the like Roman soldiers wearing leather armor wouldn't have had like segmented leather armor like
Okay.
that. It would have been made of like large pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Like the segmented Roman armor that people are familiar with is actually was made out of metal.
Mm.
I believe the name of it that people give it is Lorica segmentata, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, other than a few minor details like that, yeah, everything looks the way it's supposed to. It's clear that they put a lot of effort into getting the details right. The one thing I will say about this film is it's kind of pro-Catholic.
Yeah, definitely has a heavy leaning in that direction.
Yeah, it's like there's all sorts of things in it that are just like, okay, this is Mel Gibson trying to promote the Catholic faith here.
I was thinking that actually while we were watching the other day. It was like how it's interesting how kind of all the different or the bigger, better quality kind of Jesus movies actually have been kind of more pro-Catholic or whatever. Because even like the series one, I can't remember at the moment. The Chosen or whatever. Technically he's Catholic and he's got all that stuff. The Catholics have gotten pretty good, I guess I could say, at marketing, at least through movies and stuff like that. So
yeah, well, speaking of The Chosen, isn't Angel Studios owned by Mormons?
Yeah, which I was interesting too, because they definitely upped the game as far as like Christian movies and stuff like that, as far as the quality and stuff. Which again, they've improved greatly since when we were younger. It's like,
yeah, I mean, I guess I've never watched any Mormon movies. Well, no, that's a lie. I did watch some like random, those like those like Hanna-Barbera like Bible adventure
yeah,
cartoons from back in the day.
yeah.
I don't know if Hanna-Barbera made them or not, but the Mormons had their own version of those,
Totally.
talking about like the events from the Book of Mormon and stuff. Because I remember growing up, I was friends with a Mormon family,
Mm-hmm.
and I went over to their house and stayed there for a little while, and I guess we were bored and we put on couple of their tapes. So it was like, so other than those though, I've never, yeah, Angel Studios is the only Mormon like movie making thing that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, I've probably seen a couple, but I haven't, probably don't recognize it, know they were Mormon or whatever. One of the other things too, I think with them doing it specifically in Aramaic is like not many people speak Aramaic, so it forces everybody to kind of commit to reading the subtitles.
Yeah.
And so I think in that part it draws it really in. It makes it a little more intense and again be much more intentional with it because you have to listen to it. Because even if you speak Latin or whatever, which again not many people speak Latin these days, but it's like so pretty much everybody has to read subtitles for it. So it forces you not to be distracted also while watching it. Because that's one of the things in some ways that I dislike. It's cool and not cool that I like about like more modern era of movies is they've been doing a lot better about having native people speak the language or whatever, which again is cool in some ways. In other ways, it's kind of annoying if you're trying to like watch a movie and do something else. Or you're trying to multitask. And so I was thinking that's probably actually part of the reason why they do it is so that way you can't multitask with it. So you got to spend the time in it. And again, the Passion just leads itself to that so well. Because I usually run into that issue with like Japanese or Chinese movies like that, which they have in Japanese or Chinese, which is fun. I don't mind reading subtitles, but again, if I'm trying to do something else and quasi listen to a movie, it's like you can't do that. You have to actually sit there and read the subtitles.
Yeah.
Which again, I think was the intentional part with the Passion, which again is why I think just everything about the Passion just breeds intentionality with it, which is one of the things I really liked about it.
Yeah, one thing I can't remember if I put it in my notes or not, but one thing I found while perusing IMDb is apparently Mel Gibson wanted to release this without subtitles originally.
Oh wow! So you couldn't nobody could understand except for a few scholars. It's like,
And I guess the idea was to just have the actors' performances like basically give you the gist of the story.
that would have definitely been interesting. I don't think it probably would have been quite as popular, but it definitely would be an interesting kind of do that maybe one time. Just watch it without any subtitles.
Yeah, that would be kind of interesting. But yeah, I guess after a certain point, he realized, maybe I shouldn't do that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because I was thinking that because actually when we were watching it was the Roman soldiers is kind of interesting, kind of because also I've been in a soldier life for a little bit, or had been in, and the way they kind of portray the Roman soldiers kind of as goofy, kind of just sadistic, kind of in many ways. Which again, the other thing is like also modern soldiering versus soldiering back then when you're actually cutting people's arms and legs off is slightly different. So though I was kind of processing, I guess you'd say, with how they kind of just make them all like, we just love mutilating people or whatever, type thing. Which again, I understand that a little bit to a point, but just again, in my military experience, there's definitely, let's say, a level of that, but I don't think it's quite, at least especially in our more modern military, to that level of that the Romans were portraying in that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there were plenty of more serious Roman soldiers, but I feel like the people who would have been assigned to do stuff like this probably grew to enjoy it.
Yeah, totally. And that's the thing. It's like just like any human thing, you can get used to anything. So then you kind of got to one up it, which was the interesting thing too at the torture scene was, or the was it scouring, whatever it is, I forget the word, but beating them, scourging. There we go. So the scourging thing was you had the one dude at the little table, and his job was to make sure the dude gets the maximum amount of damage without dying. So that was like his whole thing. He's just like meticulously watching for the guy's heart. Basically make sure he's still breathing.
Yeah.
And not getting like sucked into it too much, and that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is a detail that I missed the first time around. That guy just sitting there at the little table, just kind of like, okay, is he still breathing?
Yeah, and then flip him over. Let's beat the other side of him now.
Yeah.
I was like,
But yeah, it's weird though. The level of intentionality and certain things that they have in there that they did,
yeah,
that like are not historically accurate.
Yeah.
But it's so intentional, so they did it on purpose.
Yeah.
So I'm like, certain things is like, why do they do things like that? Because one thing is you have Jesus speaking Latin to Pilate, which I guess it's possible that Jesus knew Latin.
Yeah.
And now that Jesus is glorified and ascended, obviously he knows every language on earth in existence, and before the incarnation, obviously he knew every language on earth.
Fair.
But I don't know, it just, the idea that, because I think it's pretty central to Christian theology that Jesus was fully man.
Yes.
He had to deal with the weakness of flesh. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been the perfect mediator between God and man.
Yeah, totally.
So the idea that so either you have to kind of reject the idea that he was fully man. You have to kind of reject the whole idea of the kenosis, that it talks about in, I can't remember where that is, where it says that he emptied himself and took on the form of a servant.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like you either have to kind of reject the kenosis and say, oh well, Jesus, was Jesus, so he magically knew Latin, or you have to, or your film is saying that Jesus was just because he was Jesus was highly educated
Yeah, he already knew every language or whatever.
And he was very studious, and he was just very smart, and which that doesn't make a whole lot of sense either. He was ostensibly the son of a carpenter,
Yeah.
and he worked as a carpenter, and like honestly, the fact that we have the vast amounts of gospel manuscripts that have preserved his story is a miracle in and of itself.
Mhm.
Like if he was any other person, like we would probably know little to nothing about him.
Yeah, because a lot of the other historical references to people, you have very few sources, and this is one that has many confirmed and repeated ones. Yeah, along those lines, it's kind of interesting. Like I said, kind of the weird intentionality thing, like the Jesus making a modern table or whatever.
Oh,
Just kind of
yeah.
it's like okay, it's kind of like a weird twist in there.
Yeah, it's like Jesus apparently, saw the trends coming or whatever. He was
way ahead of his time.
He was a savvy businessman, and he was a linguist, I guess.
Yeah, he's got it all.
Yeah, just very strange details that they put in there. And then the other one was, I wasn't sure if I had heard it or not, but I found a note in IMDb that confirmed it, so I
Okay.
was correct. They did pronounce the Latin with ecclesiastical pronunciation.
Yeah, I was gonna
which
say,
is totally historically inaccurate.
Any more Klingon in there? Yeah.
At this point in time, yeah, the Romans would have pronounced their Latin the classical way, where you have every C has a hard K sound,
Yeah.
every G has a hard G sound, and then later on, ecclesiastical Latin, once Latin passed out of the realm of being an actual language spoken by a people group and just became the language of the church, it took on some characteristics of Italian.
Mhm.
So in ecclesiastical Latin, C's that are followed by an I or an E have a CH sound.
Mhm.
And then G's that are followed by a I or an E have like a J sound,
Mhm.
and yeah, it's like one of those things where it's like there's only a couple of words where you would catch it, even if you knew what to listen for.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's a very small detail, but it's like, why did they put that in there,
Yeah, like I said, especially with being so intentional with everything else, it's like you think you can take the time to make the cuts just right, so that way it is all perfect. Or
Yeah, but which leads me to believe that the whole Jesus speaking Latin and the ecclesiastical pronunciation probably ties more into Mel Gibson trying to subtly promote Catholicism than anything
Yeah.
else. And that's my biggest beef with this film is you can really tell how hard it's trying to push Catholicism. But like at the same time, though, it does it in a very restrained way
Mhm.
that if you didn't know all the subtext, you wouldn't catch it.
Yeah. Yeah, but like you pointed out while we were watching, it was like everybody calling Mother Mary mother,
Yeah.
she's mother to everybody, It's like that's just what everybody does. Everybody calls her mother.
Yeah.
And so again, I point again heavily towards the Catholic parts of it of that. Yeah, it was definitely interesting. And then of course, like I said, and then you got the kind of the Hollywoodish aspects, which again they threw in there intentionally, was the whole Satan and demons and all that stuff, which again kind of weird and also kind of like drives home the point also though with a lot of stuff, especially in the garden when it has the devil there whispering and tempting him and all that stuff. It's very dramatic and all, but it's like it definitely adds a bit more urgency / intensity to the scene, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, like if you read the gospel accounts of Jesus's prayer in Gethsemane, he is like, he's in anguish.
Mm-hmm.
The text literally says that he was sweating blood.
Yeah.
And which I don't know if it really came across in the film. I'm sure they put something in there to that effect, but they didn't focus on it. So
Yeah, I think the shot was too dark to tell because you could tell he was sweating and all that stuff. So they probably did have it like in blood or whatever, but it was like I said, the shot was way too dark to be able to tell if it was actually blood or whatever.
yeah. So, but despite not being able to incorporate that in a way that would have been obvious, they did. Yeah, they did manage to convey the the fact that Jesus would have been agonizing over this prayer, and not just it wouldn't have been like, now I lay me down to sleep. It was an act. He was in anguish. He was agonizing over this prayer, and but it was cool too. You had the extra layer of like the snake comes out from underneath the feet of Satan
Mhm.
and like goes towards him, and then at that moment he finds his resolve and gets up and crushes the head of the serpent.
Yeah, being all biblical talk, it bites at your heel. Yeah, and you crush its head.
Yep. That going back to that fulfilling the prophecy in Genesis.
Yeah, yeah, because it was a little weird in the next part where they were in the Sanhedrin talking to them or whatever, and they were doing it, and you had Judas and you also had Peter like both like hugging the pillars, like which I thought was a weird way kind of expressing their anguish and their struggle. It just kind of like for me stood out kind of weird because they're like up against this thing like almost like hanging on it, like these pillars are the thing. So I don't know entirely guess what symbolism he was going for with that, but it just seemed a little more out of place because the whole crowd all pushing against each other, but then you got these two guys basically hugging pillars, which I imagine is like probably again, you can read all into that, but it was just something that kind of stood out to me as kind of like, this is kind of odd, but it's like because they were like all like sideways like hanging on the pillar. It was weird.
Yeah. Part of it too is I think this is kind of based on the idea of like passion plays.
Okay, yeah.
So it kind of makes sense to me in that regard because it's like everything is a little just extra dramatic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I think probably comes down to the intentionality part of it. Because like I said, even like, stepping on the snake's head thing and all that, it definitely adds that extra layer, like you said, of drama just to kind of like drive it home even more so than. Because it's definitely, again, it's not kind of like in the other movie we watched where it's a little bit more for like entertainment. It's definitely not like, again, for entertainment per se. It is for the drama. It is for the intensity of every single scene. And again, even with that, was as far as I liked how they usually kind of like kept the camera in the same spot, but then people would like, this person would like go over the hill and then somebody else would come back over the hill in the same exact shot. It's like within seconds of each other type thing, kind of just also showing how everything is connected, I think, in that regard. And so again, everything in the film was just so intentional. You really get that feel when you kind of focus on it.
Yeah, the drama in this film, I feel like I'm normally not a fan of like extremely overdramatic performances and over dramatizing stories. But I feel like in this case, it's justified simply because we as modern audiences are so disconnected from what it would have been like to experience this, what it would have been like to live through even just being around Jesus when these things were happening to him. And so I feel like the drama kind of helps intensify it so that it makes us experience it more like how it how it might have been to actually be there, kind of a thing, other than just because you can read the words on a page, and if you've got the imagination for it, you can imagine all sorts of things in your head. But it's like I feel like in our culture, people don't identify well with a written word. Like it seems like with the explosive popularity of films over the past 100 years or so, we've transitioned away from being like a literary society to a more visual based society.
Yeah.
So I feel like, yeah, using every trick in the book to kind of intensify the drama of each scene, I think helps us get to a point where we can feel like kind of we were, you know, there experiencing it rather than just reading the words on a page.
Yeah, and that's one of the things too, getting with the gratuitous violence, as some would say. Is like, 'cause I know a lot of people have concerns of it because of how graphic it is and all that stuff. And again, at that time too, though, again, there isn't refrigeration, there's any of that stuff. So people are more in tune with seeing blood regularly, even just, from killing animals and the sacrifices and all that stuff. It's like, whereas nowadays, I mean, you can go a long time without seeing blood unless you get a paper cut or something, like that. So like blood is something that really stands out, I think, to, again, modern civilization, at least America and stuff like that, where we're not used to seeing, especially that level of gore from things. Whereas if you have to butcher an animal every day, or whatever, for your food, for your house or whatever, you're a little more in tune with that, like you're saying. So as far as your imagination, so all we have is, again, what we get seeing visual things, because in our normal lives, there isn't that much blood and gore and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would have to agree with that. It's like life in that time period was just so much more brutal than what we're used to. Like you said, that whole everyday thing of the Jews sacrificed animals in the temple, and you had to butcher animals for your meat. Like individual families had to do that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have also like the Roman military occupation of an area. Like the Romans were brutal conquerors.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't just like, oh, the Romans are, like the US government, make sure you pay your taxes and you'll be all good. It's like they actively made their presence felt. They actively pushed the idea that they were to be feared, and that if you stepped out of line, there was bad things were going to happen to you.
Yeah, and that's, again, one of the things that we often miss, I think sometimes in scripture even, is recognize that when you're a Roman citizen, you got a lot more benefits, you got a lot more perks. They can't just beat you, because that's one of the things of this, like, none of these people were Roman citizens except for the Romans, and so they were able to beat anybody in the crowd or whatever, even the guy who they incorporated into helping Jesus carry his cross. So still were whipping him as well as they were whipping Jesus.
Yeah.
It's like if you weren't a Roman, you had like no rights at all. They could do whatever they wanted, pretty much. And so, and again, it's something which I think is a good thing that our modern civilization, at least American and stuff like that, we're a little bit better about that.
Yeah, and it's like, when we think of crucifixion, I think in the modern day we normally think of Jesus. And so you have this idea of like they crucified him and then they took him off the cross and put him into a tomb, and that was that. But it was like that was not the norm at all. The only reason that they took Jesus' body off the cross was to appease the Jews.
Yeah.
Like the Jews had proved to be a very stubborn, rebellious people, and so they were given certain concessions, and one of those was bodies were taken off the cross before sundown, if it was going to be like the Sabbath the next day or whatever.
Yeah.
Just because of just to so that they could be in line with Jewish, like their ceremonial law regarding dead bodies.
Yeah, because that's one of the things too. Usually when the Romans crucified somebody, they left them up there basically till they rotted.
Yeah.
You want to make as long of a statement as possible, type thing about it. The other interesting thing with that was I did like, or thought was interesting, was the Pilate discussion with his wife, and even with I think it was the other guard, where he was talking about how like there's been multiple rebellions here, and that Caesar's getting tired of rebellions happening. So it's like if another rebellion happens, and so it just kind of shows a little bit more also the political pressure in some ways that Pilate was under, as well as the so he's trying to not cause a riot, which again, as he mentioned, either way it could go to a riot.
Yeah.
And so.
That is another thing too. It's a cool little historical detail that it brings, because it's like you read it and you could get the impression that Pilate was just maybe a weak, wishy-washy kind of man.
Yeah.
And the truth is that he was under a lot of pressure, and like what he said in the movie was absolutely historically true, because Pilate would be basically removed from his governorship over Jerusalem in only a few years after Jesus died, just because the Jews kept rebelling
Yeah.
and he wasn't able to control them.
Yeah, and again, in the Roman army, usually any failure, you met with, you had to kill yourself or they killed you. So it's like, it wasn't something that they accepted very well as failure in the Roman thing. They don't have much forgiveness for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely, I thought that was a helpful and kind of, again, an interesting aspect to throw in there. And it did lean a little bit more too on the wife's influence kind of on him, which was kind of, I think, interesting, also kind of helpful for, I think, that time as far as explaining a little bit more. Because again, we all usually remember, typically, that women, were less than in many ways in Israel. Not all the time, but there's many times, and there's many cultures, especially during that day. And so, which they kind of just played a little bit when Mary Magdalene was complaining to the Roman guard when they first arrested Jesus or whatever, and the temple guard was just like, she's crazy. We don't know. Nobody listens to her.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and yeah, the whole thing with Pilate's wife was kind of interesting because, like, you have one detail in the actual text of the story that she's basically warning Pilate to not get involved with this because she had like a bad dream about him or something. And it's like that's like an interesting plot point, but it's like there's not much there. So the fact that they kind of expanded this into kind of a little like back and forth kind of thing and discussion was kind of cool, I thought.
yeah, one of the other things I liked it was, I don't know, there's some of the times it was a little weird, like I said, the flashback to him, making the modern table or whatever. But it's like, but I did kind of like that where, like certain things would remind him of certain things, and you could definitely see that, or different people. And how that, like, the feet, he was seeing the feet, because when he got knocked down, he was looking at somebody's sandals, like, oh, he's got dirty feet. And it's like, oh, that reminds me of washing my disciples' feet, which again is, I think, a very human thing, because I think of when I was in the military, there was times where we were out training and stuff, and it was just terrible. And then you get like lay down, and you like look at the stars, and you kind of have those moments of just, back to kind of remembering positive, happy things, it's like that versus, when you're going through something bad. And so those moments do kind of sneak in on us. And so I think that was kind of a cool way of humanizing it a lot more too. And again, like I said, some of the flashbacks were, I think, again, the table one probably was the most weirdest. The other ones all, I think, all fit pretty well.
Yeah. It was kind of cool, the little the like parallel thing about like Jesus's mother running to him, and then she's also like having a flashback of her running to grab him after he falls as a child.
Yeah. Which I thought was interesting, because I always kind of thought that, come to my mind a few other times. It's like, imagine that, you are the parents of Jesus, and again that this is the Messiah. It's like so if he falls down and gets a boo-boo, you're worried about breaking him or something like that, and then you get Mary and Joseph, where they lost him, for a while. It's just like, oh no, we lost the King of the universe, our savior, he's gone. It's like and so in some regards, like you said, that little portrayal there, it really makes her feel like a helicopter parent. Which again, how would you not be a helicopter parent in some ways if you knew you had birthed the Messiah? It's like, but again, like I said, then the Bible also talks about them losing him for a while. So it's like, so I guess again, human, you can get to a point where it's like, well, your kid has to survive. It's like, so you have that struggle of let him go versus doing that. I just try sometimes, again, as a parent, try to think of that as like, how much more would it be if you knew, like, your kid was, this is the Messiah. It's like, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I like too some of the little moments where it's like it's not actually in the text of the story, but it's like you could easily imagine it going this way. Like the sequence when he's finally gives up and he dies, and then you have that single raindrop that falls from the sky, and then as soon as it hits the ground, massive earthquake. And it's kind of like, and it's not framed that way in the biblical text, the earthquake that happens, like it talks about, the sun going black and the earthquake happening, but it's not framed in any kind of particular way. But then the way it has that single raindrop falling, and then that happening. It's almost like it kind of reframes it as if it's the father grieving
Mm-hmm.
over the torture of his son,
Mm-hmm.
which is like, it's not in the Bible, but you could also totally imagine, because like God has emotions too.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Like he created us with emotions because he has emotions.
Mm.
Like emotions are not just this extra unnecessary thing that he decided to tack on to our nature and that he's totally devoid of. He has emotions too. So I can imagine that, um, even though being God, like still in the moment seeing, you know, the apple of your eye, your beloved son being tortured by sinful men probably wouldn't feel too good.
Yeah. Eh, yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of cool. It just like everything in it just kind of like brings like really showcases like the human side of it kind of a thing. Like it allows you to empathize with the characters and the story in a way that might be kind of hard if you were just reading the words on the page kind of a thing.
Yeah, and that was even the thing, kind of even like we talked about a little bit, was how creepy kind of the demon slash devil, thing was. But it also in some ways pointed out how in those situations other forces are going to attack you. They're going to, try to encourage you. Again, like the Judas thing, where Judas, he's all depressed because, he's like, oh, I didn't think they were actually going to send him off to die. And so then these kids start poking fun at him, and then they like their faces like distort, and they look at it, like demon kind of thing, and they got all these kids chasing him, and they chase him to the hanging tree basically, and then he hangs himself. But it's like, but you could kind of again see that in how, in certain situations where it just seems like things are piling and piling up on you when you do that, and you can see how the enemy would work that towards, again, leading you to kill yourself, which again, kind of in some ways, I think also leads towards the Catholic thing. Because again, with Catholics, it's like committing suicide is like one of the worst sins you can do. And so then Judas goes and kills himself. And so I did feel, again, a little bit of the Catholic vibes there with kind of the forcing that a little bit. But
Yeah, I'm just glad they didn't go with the alternate take where his, intestines spilled out of
burst
his
out.
body.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just glad they went with the hanging.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, too, the makeup in this movie for like the torture scenes
Mhm.
was like so good.
Yeah.
Like it looks so realistic. It looks very gruesome, but it's also like realistically gruesome.
Mhm.
Cause like, you watch like a Paul Verhoeven movie or whatever, like RoboCop or
Yeah. It's
something like
it's very fake,
something
especially
like
nowadays.
that.
Yeah.
Like it's very over the top, but this was done in a way where it's like super violent, lots of blood, but like it doesn't seem like it's over the top. It doesn't seem like it's too much.
Yeah, I think also again, like you're talking about, it's like kind of RoboCop and like Terminator and any of that type of things. Like those movies didn't necessarily, the graphic parts didn't age well as far as you can. I was like, oh, you can tell that's Robotronics or whatever. It's like, but again with the Passion, it's like that actually aged pretty well. I mean, there's a few scenes like that where you can kind of tell it's paint or whatever, or work, but it's like overall, like I said, it aged really well. It's like even for the time it was made to the modern, it's like, which is one of the things, looking forward to next year when they do the part 2 that's coming out. And now with AI and all that stuff, I've seen how they're going to if they tie that in there and all that. So I thought that was kind of interesting again, how well actually, like you said, the violence parts of that aged as far as looking real.
Yeah. So that I do want to talk about that for a little bit though. The sequel. So is it like confirmed that it's coming out next year?
Yeah, when I looked it up, it said it was, in 2027. I didn't see what time of year, but because I had heard something through somebody that it was coming out this year, I thought, but when I looked online, they were saying that it's coming out next year. But it does look it's legit coming out. So
Yeah,
and it's
because
the resurrection. So.
yeah, because I remember like, since the movie came out, like they've been pushing this idea of like we're gonna do the resurrection as a sequel. We're gonna do the resurrection as a sequel, and it's like it never happened. It never happened. It
Yeah.
never happened. So it'll be interesting to see how they went about it now that it's finally happened.
Yeah, which that's one of the weird things too. Because again, speaking of modern times, like it seems like there's a lot less creativity nowadays. So it seems like they're bringing back a lot more shows from the past, or remaking them, and or finally making the sequel that everyone wanted to everything. Now that we got a little bit more of the stuff to kind of make it cheaper, using modern technology. Because the big one, like for all those super nerds out there, he's like Firefly. They're bringing it back finally after 25 years, but they're making an animated series. It's like, so it's technically coming back, but it's coming back as an animated series. So it's like, but with modern technology now, it's a lot easier. You don't necessarily have to have as big a budget or whatever and all that stuff. So I think, but in also some ways, it's also disappointing that nobody's coming up with anything new. So it's like there's occasionally you get something new, kind of a new twist on a thing or whatever, but. Yeah, I think it's getting harder and harder for people to come up with new creative ideas.
Yeah. I think part of it is I'm kind of stealing this from what's his name? Matt Walsh.
Mm-hmm.
But he talks about something like the death of the monoculture.
Okay.
So it's like prior to, say like 2007, 2006, like we kind of had like a shared culture, even if there were generational divides.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, when we were growing up, like, like people like Britney Spears and Backstreet Boys were, the hot new thing.
Yeah, edgy. Yeah.
And like, our parents' generation, like, obviously didn't like that at all. And I mean, speaking for me personally, I didn't like it at all either. But like, but at the very least, it was kind of like it was something they knew who these people were, and they understood that they were the celebrities of the moment, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
They understood that their music or whatever they created was what was in vogue at the time, and they were part of the culture, even though it was not for them specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's kind of like way different, where parents talk to their children, and like their child mentions someone that they saw on like YouTube or TikTok or something, or Instagram or whatever, and the parent is like, who is that? What is this person? Why is my child watching their content?
Fair. Yeah. I think with modern technology, again, there's just so much more of it nowadays. Whereas like I said, back then you had a very limited access to those type of things because the internet was kind of just coming out even and stuff like that. So like nowadays, yeah, you can have some random kids somewhere in the world who, all of a sudden is viral, and the kids are all, saying whatever the cool thing is that this kid sparked, and it's like, and you're like, who the heck is this kid? One of the big ones I think it was like that. There's that little kid that like would do opening boxes or whatever. I can't remember his name was, but how obsessed children were with that guy, and it's like it's just some random kid somewhere in the world, opening boxes. So like,
but yeah, that's what the whole death of the monoculture thing. When I heard that, I was like, wow, I think that's really what it is. And it's like entertainment is no longer like a guaranteed sell because of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is the markets have become so fractured because of this shift that these giant, media corporations and whatnot can't really afford to take a risk on something new or creative, and so they're kind of forced to dig back in time and pull up things that were big before the death of the monoculture.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. Another great movie which we should watch one of these times is it's a great movie and not a great movie. It's kind of along the lines of like Tropic Thunder, but it's like Wag the Dog. It's like in that they're talking about I think it was that one, but it was like an Al Pacino slash movie where he was talking about when you see the classics, you want to hear the classics. It's like because we know what we like. And so if you go to the Rolling Stones, you want to hear Satisfaction. It's like you don't want to hear whatever their new current thing, or like Eric Clapton, where Eric Clapton he came out with his new album, everybody's like, this is garbage. We want to hear the old classics. And so it's like, so even if people who you're not necessarily monetized for things that you bring out that are new, because it's hard to start something new while you have like the old classics, which everybody loves those. Which is one of the interesting things, like kind of like you were talking about. It's like where the old stuff is still cool even nowadays, even though it's like so old, just because the new stuff doesn't have much flair or whatever to it. So
yeah, it's one of those things where it's like those old things too have kind of like, they still have kind of like a hold on people, just because of like, parents raise their children
totally
in the things that they like, whether it be music or movies or what have you. And, oftentimes the children eventually find, whatever the current thing is that they're going to like. But at the same time, many younger people still have fond memories of, older movies or older TV shows or older music or whatever, simply because they grew up consuming that media because that's what their parents liked.
Yeah, and it reminds you of your good old times.
Yeah, so those things still kind of have kind of a hold on like society as a whole because of that. And then you have things that are new don't have a hold over society as a whole. They have a hold over a certain segment of society.
Yeah. I guess, again, it's probably the same thing with, I don't know, I was thinking like, old school hymns and stuff like that. One of the pastor friends I have, he loves old hymns. He said just because, they withstood the sands of time, it's like all the hymns that, were nobody really, that didn't really speak spiritually or any of that stuff. Like those ones have all kind of like fallen aside because they've gone through the trials. It's like, and so the ones that are still standing are the ones that, have some meat and potatoes to them. And so I guess that's a similar thing.
With the exception of In the Garden. I'm just kidding. I don't actually have all that much of a problem with In the Garden, but I know a lot of people are like, In the Garden is like theologically bankrupt.
Yeah.
And I guess it's true to a certain degree, but it's whatever.
Yeah, it is what it is.
One thing I did want to mention is, that I Am Jesus Christ video game you were talking about. Dude, I watched
I still haven't looked
some
that up
footage
yet,
of that.
Yeah.
I watched some footage of that. That game is, I don't know what that person was on when they made that.
Just from the person who told me about it, it's like, it sounds like it's a very sacrilegious game, I would imagine, because I was thinking that. So those who don't know, apparently there's this game called I Am Jesus Christ, and you get to play Jesus Christ and go around healing people and stuff. I'm just like, do you have like mana or something? I keep charged up or whatever, and then how do you charge it? How does Jesus charge up his mana? It's like, do you have to go off in the corner and like wait for it to recharge? It's like there's so many ways you could go down, get in trouble with this stuff, especially along theological lines and all that.
It's like it's weird. It's like you, it involves you, like, you have to, like, I think it's like the left mouse button or whatever, like the right mouse button, I think is quote unquote prayer.
Okay.
And that like helps you like recharge your faith or whatever, which is what you use to perform miracles. It's, I mean, it's not like totally wrong from a theological perspective.
Yeah.
It's just a little weird that somebody actually decided to do that. It's just like, why?
I mean, in some ways, I'm surprised it's taken this long for someone to finally do it. But it's like, because, everybody's been trying to make, fun Christian games for a long time. Where you're a Roman centurion, going through whatever or whatever. And I remember we had a card game kind of like, Magic and all those back in the day where you could, you had Bible characters, and then you had things to amp them up and all that stuff. You can give them mana, you can give them whatever, different things. They tried to make it much more along kind of Magic cards, but it was like, with Bible stuff.
That's interesting. I don't think I ever had anything like that. I grew up in a Christian household, but like we weren't like totally down the rabbit hole of replacing all secular media with Christian media type thing.
Fair. Ours was I think ours was I had a fairly good balance on it, but that was kind of like a time again, I said where Christian, media was trying to branch out and make things a little bit more kind of secular / things. So I remember like the movies and stuff again at the time were just really kind of lame. The acting was always lame and like that. It's like, and that was when Christian music videos were starting to come out and stuff like that, which again, they're super cheesy, stuff like that, which again, I think that was also the time when most music videos actually were coming out technically, but it just really kind of, I think I overall had a good balance, and I definitely had a semi-sheltered life in that, but it all worked out.
Yeah. But with this game though, it's kind of wild because it's like you can tell that the guy or whoever made it sincerely wanted to make like a good representation of like what it would be like to walk around as Jesus, to the best of his ability. But it's like, I think he bit off a little bit more than he could chew, because there's just certain parts of it that are like, why? Like all the voices are all like AI.
Okay.
And like there's this voiceover in the beginning of the game where it's like recites the John 1,
Yep.
And it shows like the cosmos and whatnot. But it's like clearly in like an AI version of like Morgan Freeman. So it's really off-putting.
That's funny. So how's the graphics on it? Because I imagine something along the lines of like Roblox graphics or something. Was it like better than that? Or
no, it's one of those things is like computers and consoles have so much processing power.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to make a game look really, really bad.
Unless you intentionally do it. Yeah, it's like, which is funny because that's still a genre of its own. It's like potentially bad looking games or whatever.
Which it's like, so it's like kind of the thing where it's like back in the day, when it was like the current thing was like N64 and PS1, like they had to work really, really hard to make games that actually looked even decent on those systems. So there's most of the games for those systems look like absolute trash.
Yeah, very blocky.
And have aged very, very poorly. And we don't have that problem anymore.
Yeah.
Which is cool, but it's also like now it's just like, you look at a game and it's like there's not a whole lot wrong with it, but it's like you can tell they didn't put a whole lot of love into the visuals.
Fair.
And then so you've got weird things like you got the AI generated voices, and then you've got like just like certain like trying to expand like plot points into like whole quests.
Yeah.
And then mangling the actual story in the process. Because like one of the quests is, you like get like you wake up in the middle of the night in bed and like an angel appears and tells you, that it's, time to do your thing, I guess. And then tells you to go find John the Baptist.
Okay, so that's where it starts.
And they turn it into finding John the Baptist into a whole quest where it's like, you go to Joseph, your dad, or presumably your dad, and say ask him about John the Baptist, and he's like, well, I don't know. Ask Mary. And you ask Mary about John the Baptist,
Okay.
and she points you to, you know, some other place you could go in like the market or whatever that she heard somebody talking about him there, so you might find more information there.
Okay.
It's like, I get what they were trying to do, but in the process of trying to do that, you like kind of covered over an important like story connection, is that Jesus and John the Baptist were related.
Yeah, it's cousin.
And
Well, Mary's
like
cousin, so yeah.
they weren't like, clearly they were in contact with each other to a certain degree, because you have Mary and Elizabeth
Yeah.
both pregnant, both, giving each other the news of what's been going on in their lives. And so it's like the whole idea that you would have to be like, where can I find information on where to get John the Baptist? He's your freaking cousin, dude.
Well, they had to do something for a mission. It's like it's like you get to avoid Roman patrols. I mean, it's like you guys are going out to the wilderness. I was like, yeah.
But yeah, that game was clearly that guy had like a grand vision or what it was supposed to be, but I think he bit off more than he could chew.
No Catholic vibes in that one?
No Catholic vibes in that one. Although the Satan is very clearly kind of inspired by the Satan character in Passion of the Christ.
Oh, really? Okay.
Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, because that was definitely kind of an interesting portrayal of it. Which again, I think it worked in the Passion. Was the portrayal of Satan, and kind of like you and I had talked about before, was the kind of the counterfeit parts of it, which I think is what it was kind of what we had talked about. It was kind of trying to portray with the different kind of things, whereas these are like the sacrilegious versions of the same thing that Jesus is trying to do with when he has the big old weird baby or whatever.
Oh yeah,
the other parts of it.
Oh my god, I don't know how they did that. I should have looked that up actually. See if I could have found some info. I do not know how they did that scene, like whether it was like an actual person or if it was like some kind of like computer generated thing or
animatronics or whatever. Something.
I don't know. Like, I don't know what it was, but that giant baby thing was very, very creepy.
Yeah, and that's the other weird thing, kind of like as we'll get into the next movie with Apocalypto, was they had kind of a similar thing when they were in the Aztec village or whatever, and they have all these like weird little people or whatever and stuff like that. It's like deformities and stuff. It's just like, I don't know, maybe it's something Mel Gibson has like just to throw in there as his little signature or something. But it was it's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. So before we move on, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we covered it pretty well. It was interesting at the end when it has him, because you actually get to see at the end of the movie. Spoiler alert! You get to see him kind of rise from the dead, and then like where it shows him through the hole in his hand or whatever, which is kind of an interesting, trippy kind of thing to do.
Yeah, that was a cool little detail.
Yeah, but other than that, so I think the rest of it. So I'm looking forward to the next one when they eventually finally finish it, and really good movie, like I said. Definitely is one though that you have to sit there and commit to watching it versus not something you just turn on in the background. It's an intentional movie that you gotta be intentional to watch.
Yes, I would have to agree with that. And with that, we're gonna get right into the trivia.
Dun dun dun.
So yeah, for those listening, this is IMDb trivia, so take this with a grain of salt. Although there is a pretty wild one here towards the end that I actually had to look up, and it turned out to be true. Okay, so first one. Jim Caviezel experienced a shoulder separation when the 150-pound cross dropped on his shoulder. The scene is still in the movie.
So that was legit pain, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, looking at the actual crucifixion parts of it, where he's carrying the cross and he's being like hoisted up on it and stuff, like that can't have been easy.
No, totally. And that's one of the things that recently I hadn't known, but I saw that in the movie was because in the movie, and he has a full cross that he's carrying, but the two thieves are only carrying the cross beams, which I guess is actually more common. Typically, that what historian always listened to was talk about was that usually, you would just carry the cross beams versus carrying the whole cross, and they would just reuse the middle beam. But so that's interesting that in it they actually have him carrying the whole cross, and then the thieves just carrying the cross beams of theirs.
Yeah, a lot of the time they wouldn't even have actual like a vertical beam to crucify people on. They just have a tree.
Mm-hmm.
They just tie your hands to the beam and then carry you to the tree and then nail that beam to the tree and hang you there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was kind of an interesting little detail. All right. Next one. This is the highest grossing foreign language film or subtitled film in U.S. box office history.
Mm.
It is also the highest grossing religious film in the worldwide box office, which I think makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're talking about, it's like, well, it's not Aramaic, and so not many people speak Aramaic, so it's like, but yeah, again, the context of it, it's world renowned. So
yeah. All right, next one here we got. This is kind of an interesting one. During the scourging scene, Jim Caviezel accidentally got whipped twice. A whipping post that would take the blows was set up behind him so that the camera wouldn't pick it up, but one of the actors accidentally missed it and hit Caviezel instead.
Ouch.
The first time hurt so much that it knocked the wind out of him, with Caviezel stating that I may be playing Jesus, but I felt like Satan at that moment, causing him to curse out in pain at the other actor. The second time, it caused him to wrench his hand quickly from his shackles, scraping his wrist badly. The remainder of the scourging scenes were finished using visual effects. The actors playing Roman soldiers held sticks without the leather tails and acted out the whipping motion, while Caviezel would react as if hit. The tails were later digitally composited into the shots. Makeup wounds on Caviezel's body were digitally covered until the actual hit by the whip, creating the illusion that they suddenly appeared.
Interesting. So they actually messed them all up originally, and then they just digitally did that part instead of digitally adding in the scars. Okay. I was wondering kind of like how they did, because that'd be a lot of work to take the whip, then sit there, redo it. It's like each time or whatever. So
let's see. And this next one, this is actually a story I've heard before too. In interviews with Newsweek magazine and several other media, Jim Caviezel spoke about the difficulties he experienced while filming. This included being accidentally whipped twice, which has left a 14-inch scar on his back, and dislocating his shoulder from the weight of the cross. Caviezel also admitted that he was struck by lightning while filming the Sermon on the Mount and during the crucifixion. His hair actually caught fire from this, but he was otherwise miraculously unharmed.
Dang.
In 2023, the actor revealed that he was taken to the hospital and actually died for a few minutes. This made him feel even closer to God when he was revived.
That's one way. He took it literal, method acting with this one.
Yeah, the scenes of him hanging up on the cross in the dead of Italian winter with temperatures of about 25 degrees Fahrenheit and about 30 knot winds. I guess this was written by Europeans.
Okay.
It's in the
Makes
wind
sense.
speeds are in knots. So it would have been a little over 30 miles an hour.
Yeah, it's cold, especially when you're not wearing anything except for a loincloth, pretty much.
Yeah, it caused him to contract hypothermia and pneumonia. Finally, because makeup was used to create a swollen eye, his lack of depth perception gave him migraine headaches.
Yeah, I was noticing that, because especially like at the beginning part when they first beat him, his eye, they had it way swollen, which I guess is another part of it. They believe his eye was injured in the scourging or the different parts of it. But
yeah,
which would make sense again. But yeah, I was surprised at that too, because the first beginning part when they first beat him, when they take him from the Gethsemane, his eyes all swollen, which again would happen.
Let's see. This one was a weird one to me, but like I put it on here just because it's like, what? But so apparently rated number 1 of the 25 most controversial movies of all time by Entertainment Weekly in 2006.
I mean, I can see. I mean, any Jesus thing is gonna be controversial.
Yeah, I do remember all the hubbub about like, oh, this film is anti-Semitic.
Yeah, yeah,
And then Mel Gibson had his, unfortunate DUI
yeah,
arrest that further cemented that reputation.
yeah. Yeah, it wasn't a great time as far as that. I mean, like I said, like any religious thing, especially or even like Christian things, like anytime something like that comes out, it's always going to cause controversy with half the people love it, half the people hate it.
Yeah, it's really funny how like devout um Mel Gibson is, and he is so rough around the edges.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Let's see, what else do we got here? Oh, this one, yeah, actually, when we watched it just the other night, I was actually noticed this. Originally, the second confrontation between Pilate and the Sanhedrin included a line where the Sanhedrin say, "His blood be on our heads and on the heads of our children."
Mhm.
Although this line comes from the Gospels, Mel Gibson removed the subtitle of the line to avoid further allegations of the movie having an anti-Semitic message. The actual line in Aramaic was left in the movie, however.
I was noticing that during the scourging sign thing too, the Roman insults, they didn't actually subtitle those. So it's like, so you didn't know what they actually, I mean, you could definitely tell they were insulting him or whatever, but so it's probably along those same lines. They probably did that also for, I guess it would be why you consider anti-Semitic. But again, that was the whole point. They were Romans and they didn't like the Jews. So it's like,
Well, I mean, I don't know. The only things I heard them saying that weren't subtitled was them counting.
hmm.
Because when they were
Yeah, each whip.
each whip, they were counting up in Latin.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm not too good with Latin, but I know enough to recognize that they were counting up the numbers
Mhm.
to like 40 or whatever.
Yeah.
That was I didn't really I guess I if they did anything else, I guess I didn't catch that wasn't subtitled. I guess I didn't catch what
Maybe it
they
wasn't that, but it
said.
might have been when they were in the prison and they were put the thorns on him and all that stuff, and they were beating him with their hands or whatever. I can't remember, but there was a part where you could tell they were insulting him, but the insults didn't pop up in the subtitles.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because they do have like, when they're beating him in the cell or whatever,
Mhm.
and they bow down to him and they call him King of Worms.
Yeah.
And they say, "Hail, Wormy King."
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess they do say a few other things in there that they don't subtitle.
Fair.
So maybe it was some crude stuff that they're like, we should leave this out. Because that's kind of the interesting thing is like, a lot of kids, myself included,
Mhm.
went to go see this movie
Oh,
when it
totally.
came out. And it's like, you know, our parents were okay with the violence in the context that, it was the actual stuff that Jesus suffered.
Yeah.
But I could imagine that there could be an uproar over some crude language appearing in the subtitles.
Yeah. And the other
So,
thing too is that the violence though at that time also in movies wasn't as prevalent as it is nowadays. So it's like so I think for the time too, that was a edgy. It was definitely on the upper end of violence people had seen even in movies. Whereas, nowadays, we got John Wick and we got all those other things where there's blood and all this stuff all over the place. Whereas I think at that time, again, in history, it's like, I don't think there was as many of those movies that had all that gratuitous violence as much. It was kind of starting to make its rise, but
yeah, I guess there weren't a lot. Maybe some like some of the earlier Tarantino films and
yeah. Dust Till Dawn, all that type of thing. Or
stuff like that. But yeah, definitely not as many as there are now. All right, then here's a detail that I totally missed because I don't know the difference between these two languages by sound. Um, while the characters of the film mostly speak Latin and Aramaic, Hebrew is spoken a few times. The gathering of the Sanhedrin, Simon of Cyrene speaking, and the woman who gave water to Jesus on his way to Golgotha.
Okay. Yeah, I hadn't caught the difference in the language switches there, but
Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to tell. I could only tell the difference when they were speaking Aramaic and when they were speaking Latin. That was it. So, but it's cool that they snuck a few Hebrew lines in there.
Mhm.
And then this is the really crazy one that I had to look up because I'm like, there's no way this is real. Somebody just made this up and put this on IMDb just to troll people. But apparently it's real.
Okay.
This is the last movie that former Iraq President Saddam Hussein watched in his cell in December 2006, shortly before his execution. On a DVD player which his GI soldiers who kept him under custody permitted him to see. Saddam Hussein kept a good relationship with his guards. He told them he was amazed and shocked by the cruelty of this movie and added that Iraqi people would never have treated Jesus this way.
Well, that's definitely unique political and like CIA psyop or something.
When I was looking this up, like one of the Google results, one of the websites framed it like Saddam Hussein got to hear the gospel before he died. I mean, I guess technically that's true.
This says that could be the new requirement for death row inmates. So like right before you go to the electric chair or whatever, you got to watch The Passion.
I mean, honestly, I feel like they should be doing that if they're not already.
Fair.
Let's see. And then, yeah, the last one is something I caught, but I wasn't sure, and then this confirmed it. The Latin featured in this film is spoken with a distinctly Italian accent, most notably through the soft CICE and GIGE syllables. Yep, the subtle little things like Catholicism. All right, and with that, I think we're done with this, and we're going to move on to our next film, Apocalypto.
Woo woo.
Released in 2006, as the Mayan kingdom faces its decline, a young man is taken on a perilous journey to a world ruled by fear and oppression. Directed by Mel Gibson, written by Mel Gibson and Farhad Safina, starring Rudy Youngblood, Gerardo Terracena, Raul Max Trujillo, and Dalia Hernandez. So, what's our initial impression of this film, Nick?
Overall, again, I think it's good. It's not as intentional feeling. It's definitely done much more for entertainment, you can tell in it, versus the intentionality that you see in The Passion of Christ. Some of the again, certain things kind of stand out, which are similar, which you can kind of tell it's the same director type thing, Mel Gibson. Which again, I think part of that is, like I said, when they're in the Mayan village and they're seeing, the misshaped people or whatever, and like little people and all that stuff, that is interesting and kind of like, I don't know why you would throw that in there, but it's like, again, of course, obviously it's the foreign language, which also again adds the intention of you having to sit there and actually pay attention kind of to it. But it's fairly easy to follow, I think. Overall, there's a few little things. You got the one sadistic, really bad guy, but which I think is a little bit more natural, I guess, as a feeling. But what's that? Overall, I think it's a decent movie. So.
Yeah, this one is kind of an interesting one to follow up The Passion, because it's like, it's got a much more traditional sort of story arc to it. You have the beginning with, the happy children run around the village and, scenes of, various comedic scenes happen, and then everything goes wrong. But then everything, well, I wouldn't say everything, but, our hero triumphs in the end.
Yeah, and overall, I mean, as far as hero stories go, it's a fairly happy ending. Again, overall, I mean, everybody, spoiler alert, but the movie's been out for a while, but it's like, he ends up with his whole family, but, everybody else in the whole village is gone.
Yeah.
So it's like, and he didn't die from any of his infections or anything. So it's because he got stabbed and shot a lot, or not shot, but yeah, shot with arrows a lot. But it was like,
yeah, that was one thing in this film, was like, dude, this guy's got like crazy endurance.
Yeah.
Like, he was he was mortally wounded multiple times in this film,
Yeah.
and he just kept on going.
The love of family, just pushing it through. Which again, yeah, it's like, because that was a long run he did. But again, I guess if you live in the jungle, you would have a lot of heavy cardio in your life. But still, yeah, it's like, again, you gotta have the hero thing. So gotta push through it.
Yeah. This film too is kind of interesting because it's like, it's one thing to watch a subtitled film about the life of Jesus.
Mhm.
It's quite another thing to watch it about, like a bunch of Mayans.
Mhm.
So I will say that this movie does a good job in kind of like presenting the characters in a way where you can kind of like empathize with them and connect with them. Cause yeah, I feel like if they didn't do that, this movie would not be nearly as good just because it's a movie about Mayans and it's completely subtitled the whole way through,
Yeah, well, that's where it's like I said, in kind of just the enjoyment aspect of the movies, usually I like kind of if they start out in like the natural language and then they transfer at some point in the first 10 minutes or whatever to like English, just because it's easier to follow that way. But like I said, in some ways that might have probably taken away from the movie. It was just in English, because then you could kind of not have to pay much attention. Whereas if you have to read the subtitles again and focus on it, then it draws you in, and you can be a little more intentional with stuff, which again, it definitely is nowhere near the intentionality that the first one had. It's definitely much more for entertainment value. And like you said, it has much more of the traditional flow of a story.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like it's kind of packaged in an off-putting way, but at its core, it's not really all that strange of a movie.
Yeah.
It's got familiar character archetypes, familiar story beats, but it uses them pretty effectively, I would say. I was entertained by this film.
Yeah, it's definitely not like a boring film in that regard. I mean, unless you get tired of reading subtitles, but it's like, it's got the action, adventure, love, romance ish. It's like it's got like I said, especially at the beginning, it has a lot more comedic parts to it, which are kind of funny and kind of like things that you would expect from a bunch of guys hanging out together in the woods. It's like that thing, like
Yeah.
harassing each other. And with it though, it always anytime there's like a civilization type thing where it's like as we call simpler civilization. It always in some ways makes me long for that. Whereas, it's just the simple life, if you go find food, but obviously the flip side is if you don't find food, then you starve to death and die. But it's like,
Yeah.
it's like when that is your life, is just trying to stay alive. Yeah. Not even to the dramatic, fighting each other type, just the simple fighting against nature and the jungle and all that stuff.
Yeah. This film really highlights again the brutality of like earlier eras in history, because it's like it's kind of funny, like the way we're taught about Mayans in school. I feel like they kind of sneak in some of that like noble savage type mythology in there. It's like the Mayans and the Aztecs were very, very brutal cultures. And this movie portrays the Mayan side of things very, very well. Their constant sacrifices to appease the sun god and all that. And it's kind of cool too that it's like it's it does have some larger themes though that are kind of like are kind of like it's like at its core it's like a normal hero's journey type film, but then it's got some kind of like larger themes if you like look into it a little bit more, because you have that whole thing about prophecy.
Mhm.
Like, maybe I don't know enough about um indigenous South American culture, but apparently it's not weird that, sick little girls with leprosy are prophets or whatever, I guess. But yeah, you have that scene where they're like pushing her away with a stick because she's got some kind of disease. Then you can see sores all over her face. And she like gives them this prophecy of how they're gonna die, and all the has all the has all basically all the things that all the main character is gonna go through, all the different signs, if you will, of how the main character is gonna bring these characters to their doom.
Mhm.
And then that kind of like there's that sense of inevitability. Like you just know from that moment on, when you see the leopard, or the jaguar, you know, eat that guy's face, from the moment you see that, basically you kind of like get the idea, like, okay, things are going down, like, these people are going to meet their doom one way or another. It's kind of inevitable. And kind of like the historical time period in which they placed it in, you could see that the Mayan Empire is already in decline. There's like famines, disease breaking out, and then, spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, the Spaniards show up.
Yeah.
So it's like so it's kind of interesting where it's like it's a normal hero's journey kind of tale, but then you have this like idea of like what makes a civilization kind of collapse, like sort of hung over the top of that.
Yeah, and that was one thing interesting. There's quite a bit, yeah, foreshadowing stuff because, like, even at the very beginning, with the old guy telling the story or whatever, that basically, man takes until the world has nothing left to give, and
Yeah.
then you get the girl, saying basically, this guy's gonna usher in the apocalypse, and that the sun will be blacked out and all this stuff. And like I said, and then it ends, it kind of in some ways is pointing towards those guys being the Mayans being the bad guys, but then the Spaniards show up at the end, which are going to come and take even more, it's like, and so it definitely has that, yeah, like I said, underlying thing, as well as, your whole hero story is trying to save his wife and kid and all this stuff and all that normal thing. And again, it kind of has that too, because he's, the son of the leader of the village. And so he has that, you definitely feel the pressure of kind of being all his buddies and stuff are all looking to him kind of to save them during this thing, and there's nothing he can do while they're being sacrificed and all this stuff. And so it definitely has that layer also of the pressure of being in charge, and when things are out of your control that you can't control. And so it's like there's another layer of that onion, as we would say.
Yeah. One thing I will say about this film is it holds up pretty well visually.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, like there's not like really any egregious use of CGI, or at least none that I could tell. Um, and then there was a couple of shots where like you could tell the leopard was like animatronic. I keep saying leopard, I mean
Yeah,
jaguar.
right.
The jaguar was animatronic in a couple of shots, you could tell, but for the most part, everything looks pretty good, which is kind of cool because like I guess this film was shot digitally,
Okay.
um, and wasn't shot on film. I saw something where it's like the footage that they took for this movie would like equate to like 2 million feet of film or something
Oh,
like that.
dang.
So apparently they shot a lot of footage, and it's all digital, like shot digitally, and you can kind of tell in some places because the slow motion is real choppy,
Mm-hmm.
but like yeah, for the time period it came out in, and for what they were trying to do with it, I feel like the look of the film still really holds up very well.
Yeah, like you said, definitely the worst parts, yeah, were the jaguar, the animatronics of that. It's like you could definitely tell that's an animatronic cat versus it's like that. But again, otherwise, yeah, it holds up pretty well. So if there was any CGI-ish stuff or whatever, I'd imagine it probably was in the Mayan village when they just have so many people and stuff. So there's so much going on that you don't necessarily notice, and they definitely had enough normal actors in there to balance it out, so you didn't so it didn't pop out at you.
Yeah. Um, yeah, one thing about this the whole inevitability of it though
Mhm.
was kind of one thing I didn't like. It almost like kind of sapped the tension out of it
Mm.
because it's like the way it's set up, like you kind of know how it's gonna end, and it's like okay, you're just waiting to see like the details of it basically.
Yeah.
And so that was one thing where it was like they were going for something, but it kind of like took something away from the movie too, because like with that sense of inevitability, there's not really any tension in any of the scenes. Like there's all these intense scenes of him running away from them and they're trying to kill him and all these dangers that he goes through, and none of it is really all that tense.
Mhm.
Like usually there's when in a film like this, you want there to be kind of like tension that like what's going to happen? Is he going to make it? Is he going to be all right? But it's like in this you kind of already know how it's going to go.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things too. Again, remembering back to kind of when the movie came out, was this was like pre like Game of Thrones or any of those where they actually kill main characters or whatever. And so I was like, it definitely has that feel of like the main character is going to survive. It does get a little edgy with like some of his BFFs who are quasi main characters all die. Oh, spoiler again, they die, and so he's like, again the only one who really kind of makes it out. Whereas like again, this was pre Game of Thrones where you'd have main characters die, which again was one of the biggest I think thrills of like that type of Game of Thrones or any of those things like that, where it was like you don't know who's gonna survive, it's like the main they had no problem killing main characters, it's like, and so that definitely wasn't a thing back then when it came out too. And the other thing is like also again I feel that's one of the problems when you do a thing from history, a movie from history anyways. It's like, well, World War II movie, but you know how it's gonna end. It's like that Germans lose. It's like I mean they did have some wins too, so depending on how well you know your history.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where it's like with this movie you got to kind of like with this type of movie you got to really sell that the drama aspect of it. Like you got to be able to find ways to keep your audience kind of on the edge of their seats,
Mhm.
even though they kind of deep down they know the main character is going to survive and make it through. And so yeah, that was one of the areas where I feel like the film kind of fell a little flat. Is it wasn't super like there wasn't no like heart pounding moments like oh my god what's gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah, because again, the other thing too is, like I said, coming from the Passion, where everything is intentional and everything is very overly dramatized. It's like this one definitely didn't have the overly dramatization as it did. There was one scene though, like I said, which just kind of is a weird thing that stands out to me. Is like there, I think it's when they were going through the Mayan village. There was another scene where. Oh no, that's what it was. When the mother gets, nobody wants to buy the mother at the slave market, so they're just like, "Oh, well, you're free here." And they just like let her go, and she's like doesn't know what to do, and everybody's like, "What?" And it's like, but then she does the weird thing too, which I don't know if this is just a Mel Gibson thing or whatever. She like hugs the pillar to again thing like Peter and Judas did in the Passion one, where they like get on the like really close to the pillar, and it's just something that really weirds. I don't know why it weirds me out or whatever. It's just something that stands out, and I find very odd. But it seems to be a director thing or whatever.
Yeah, that was kind of a thing too. Is like that could have been. I feel like there could have been some kind of like thing in that moment where like you feel like the dude and the mother-in-law kind of reconcile with each other,
Yeah.
but that doesn't really happen.
And it's a little weird and edgy because again, it's like it's one of those things where it's like nobody finds you of any value, so they just simply let you go. Versus, they brought you, dragged you through the jungle to the slave market, and nobody wants to buy you. So it's like that's kind of insulting in some ways, like personally for like your ego, but it's also like I'm survived, but like now you're in a strange big old city and you're from the jungle and you have no idea, what to do. So it's kind of it's definitely one of those things like if you get in the moment of it, it's like that's quite the conundrum and kind of a little emotional journey there.
Yeah. Yeah. just little stuff like that where it's like also too when they were like bringing the captives back and they like just left the kids there
Mm.
and it's like did they just like assume that they wouldn't be able to take care of themselves so that the jungle would take them eventually or were they just like it's kind of weird.
Yeah, because the other thing is, like, a lot of times, other civilizations typically would take the kids because then you can raise them up as, how you want them to be raised or whatever.
Yeah.
But I can also imagine it's a little bit more of a hassle and they're not as hardy per se. The other part of it I would think probably to a point is you want at least somebody to kind of repopulate so that way you have somebody else to come back and sacrifice, next time you need a million sacrifices or endless sacrifices to the sun god. So that way, you can get your crops back or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like if you're gonna do like, endless sacrifices, you gotta find a way to keep the population up. And, totally brutalizing villages and raising them to the ground doesn't seem like a winning strategy.
Fair, and that was one of the things I was kind of confused with was after, because the sun comes, gets blacked out, and they're like, oh, the god's fulfilled. He's full of blood. We don't need to sacrifice anymore. They're like, well, what do we do with all these prisoners? And he's like, just get rid of them. It's like, they literally it showed you that they had like a rock mine and stuff out there. It's like, these are a whole bunch of able-bodied guys, which you think you just send them out to the rock mines, but I guess also there are warriors, so they potentially could cause some uprising. So instead they went and had some fun with them.
I mean, also you could just like keep them in prison till you needed to sacrifice them again.
Yeah, it's it was kind of weird. I mean, I could see him definitely taking the one dude that he hated out there to kill him or whatever, or play with him, and kill him. But it's like, yeah, just simply killing, 10 guys or whatever, just because for the fun of it. I mean,
Yeah,
it seems like you'd put them to work.
I guess if that's I guess that just must have been part of the culture.
Fair.
They because it's kind of funny how they like, they ritually killed all these people and then it's like once they no longer had a need to ritually kill these people, they're like, well, we'll kill them for fun then.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Which
like,
again,
what?
I can see to a point because think of like Genghis Khan or any of that type of thing. Which again, he didn't necessarily kill just to kill, but it's like you can definitely get in that mode, especially if you said, I think if you've been killing a lot, and so again, it's nothing to you. Especially again that time, like I said, they barely had knives at that time. They had the obsidian blades and stuff like that, and they had a few arrows. But it seemed like majority of the damage that they would do was with clubs, which is a terrible way to go, being blunted to death, basically. And so, whereas like they didn't as much shoot people or whatever, as so it definitely is a different level of again violence that you kind of get used to when you have to be that close to people.
Yeah. Yeah, because I feel like men naturally sort of compartmentalize, like this part of my life goes over here and this part of my life goes over here and they never intersect.
Mm.
But like, yeah, like when like you said, when you're getting up to the point where you're bludgeoning people to death and like hacking off their heads and stuff, it's like that takes a little bit extra than just the normal male compartmentalization. Like
Totally.
at some point you probably begin to enjoy it a little bit.
Yeah. And yeah, and I mean that's always kind of like a thing anyways, because you definitely get the guys, again, like if you get good at killing people, I mean what else do you do with your life? It's like type thing. Which again is even nowadays sometimes guys get that in the military. And it's like but the other interesting thing with that too, in this movie in particular, was like they were kind of showing too, the different layers of different civilizations and how ultimately they're still kind of humanish. They didn't do it as much with the Mayans, but they kind of, as they were going through the Mayan village, on the way to the temple, they, were goofing off with the kids that were in their own village. It's like the other kids, they were all rude to and all that, but it's like, it just shows you how, in your own civilization or whatever, you're a normal guy. It's like you appreciate your people. It's like, whereas in other civilization, you just totally demolish it or whatever. And so it's, like I said, the kind of compartmentalization part of it that it shows kind of the human aspect as well as of that part of it, as well as the violent part of it. So I think they played a little bit on the emotions there. Again, it wasn't super blatant, but it was, I think that's a little edginess that they were trying for.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like overall this movie is like has a lot going for it. Um but and it's certainly entertaining, but it doesn't like come across quite as deep as it maybe could have.
Mhm.
Like I feel like they tried to set up a lot of stuff that didn't just fully come through.
Hmm.
But for the most part, I feel like they achieved what they set out to do, which from what I understand, I guess Mel Gibson said it was like supposed to be like it wasn't supposed to be like the Mayans. Making it about the Mayans wasn't he wasn't really saying anything about the Mayans specifically. It was just about the Mayans because he thought that would be an interesting backdrop to tell the story of basically how civilizations come to an end,
Hmm.
basically. And so his idea for it was like it was supposed to even though it was set during a specific time about a specific people, the story itself was supposed to apply universally to civilization in general.
I think overall there definitely was a kind of underline again because you got the little jungle villagers who then are brought to the big city, the Mayan civilization, and then at the end you got the Spanish coming. So it's like it definitely shows kind of like you said, like he was trying to portray the end of different civilizations, so the end of the jungle civilization to the beginning of the Mayan or the end of the Mayan civilization, how kind of closely they were connected too, which was kind of an interesting twist on it.
Yeah. All right, before we get into the trivia, you got any other last thoughts?
Let me see. I think I had one more thing. Look at notes. I did think it was funny, kind of the bees scene.
Oh
It's like,
yeah,
it's like
the bees.
you got the bees, and just like you said, you knew all these guys were gonna die, and so they just kind of walked through the different ways. You got the guy got the jaguar, then you got the bees, and then you got the bunch of them. The waterfall, the guys who died off jumping off the waterfall.
Yeah, the snake bite and all
And
that.
then the actual finally physical fighting and killing people, and then again, it all kind of the other thing is, I guess in some ways the foreshadowing because at the very beginning, they killed the anteater or boar or whatever it
It
was,
was a tapir.
a tapir, with the trap or whatever, and again, that's how he. Spoiler again. It's like that's how he kills the final boss guy. Which again, the other interesting thing with that, that's what the point I was gonna make was. There's only one real big actor, and that is actually the Mayan leader. He's the only kind of like recognizable. Actor in that. Everybody else, anyways, I don't recognize many of the other ones because again, it's harder when they're in tribal makeup and stuff. But he was the only kind of bigger name, I guess I would say, in it.
Yeah, I don't think there was. I don't think. Yeah, there was no like major Hollywood stars in this film.
But like you're talking about too, is like it's kind of like a B plus kind of movie because again, like when I was on deployments, you have your A movies, which are all your big name actors, and you have your B movies, and then you got your really garbage movies, which are C. And like you said, the acting in it was fairly decent. It was fairly decent acting. Like I said, the story could obviously use a little bit more and stuff like that, but everything was kind of, I put it in kind of the B plus category as again that kind of class of movie. So
Yeah, it's kind of like an indie film before like indie films were really a thing like they are now. Feel
mhm.
like whereas like back in those days, like indie film meant like some just like you know like some college students running around with camcorders, and now you have indie films that are like full like professional productions. So this one kind of like was almost like that kind of an indie film, but in an era that didn't have movies like that, at least none that I can remember.
Yeah, and I wonder too is how much that maybe portrays as a better film because we don't know the actual language. So, because again, usually like a lot of films, the so you kind of already recognize it's a translation. So maybe the English isn't going to be the greatest or whatever. Because like I said, like a lot of C movies or even B movies, a lot of it's the script writing that just kind of brings it down in some ways. Because even if you have there's been a few movies where it's actually a really good actor, but the lines in the movie just suck. Whoever wrote the script is just not
Yeah,
good at it. And so it's like no matter how good of you are portraying it, it's like you could be a really great acting out, but it's like just the lines just suck.
yeah. But ultimately, I feel like this movie's definitely worth a watch.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't call it like a masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination, but it is definitely a well-crafted film and it's entertaining.
Yeah, it's not one you'd watch every weekend, type thing. Which again, like I said, similarly, kind of like The Passion. Not it's the same level as The Passion, but it's like it's if you want to take the time to sit there and read through subtitles, it's a decent movie. But again, like I said, I think I'd only watch it a few times here and there just to kind of refresh my memory on it versus super for just entertainment.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, let's get right into the trivia now. All right. Like I said before, this is IMDb, so take it with a grain of salt. Many substantial speaking roles were filled by Mayan people who had never acted before. Sick Girl, interesting character name, who curses the hunting party as they and the captives pass right before entering the city, was played by a 7-year-old who lived in a dirt-floored hut in a village similar to Jaguar Paws. What a strange detail, but sure, let's go with it. um, what do we have here? Oh, Mel Gibson claimed that Rudy Youngblood was genuinely running from the Jaguar, which was only kept from reaching him by a tether. Gibson added, "You can't train a Jaguar," which I would assume is true.
Bro looked like he was running for his life, so he did act that out well. Yeah, like, apparently he was running for his life.
Yeah, it's really funny too, because like in that scene, it's like aside from a couple shots where it's like an animatronic thing, that's a real jaguar
Yeah,
chasing him down. It's like
definitely
wow.
motivation.
Oh man. Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. As a teenager, Mel Gibson was once called almost by an older boy a deep insult. I don't know how.
Okay, so that he brought that into the movie.
Yeah, that
Almost,
inspired the line in which a headhunter calls Jaguar Paw almost.
yeah. But yeah, it was kind of a weird kind of thing thrown in there, which like okay, but it's like it was yeah. So apparently it was more of a personal connection than a.
Yeah, that makes more sense because I was like, your name is almost. What does that even mean?
Yeah, because it's like, well, was it they almost killed him or they almost broke him? It's like yeah. At the end, obviously, it kind of ties in a little bit better, but it's like yeah, how he initially gave the name. It seemed like something that they tried hard to get into the script, even though it was like it doesn't really fit, but we want this in here. So.
Yeah. Let's see. This one's interesting. Mel Gibson turned down the lead role in 2006's World Trade Center in order to direct this film. So I guess he really believed in it.
I still don't think I've ever seen World Trade Center, the actual movie.
Yeah, I've never seen it either. This brings up an interesting thing though, is I guess Mel Gibson was like all in. Like this was not just like some, something to do on a weekend for him. This was like he really, really believed in this project, and I guess this movie came out like hot on the heels of his DUI incident. So I get a lot of the critical reviews for it was like, despite the fact that Mel Gibson is a giant anti-Semitic asshole, um, you know, it's clear that he's a very talented director, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that time in history and how it was kind of interesting. Yeah, because he came out with the big movies and he really was throwing himself all into it. And again, they weren't garbage movies, and so but then his personal life though, that was when he was in his down spiral and he hadn't hit bottom yet. And so it definitely was a weird time just being around during that time when this came out. That it was definitely kind of the conflict between the two because, like I said, he had these big movies come out and he's like, oh, he's great, and then but it's like, yeah, but his personal life is a mess. Which again,
Yeah, this leads to another thing which I find interesting is Mel Gibson. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is there really anyone else like him? Someone who was like a major Hollywood actor, who starred in some big films, and then like went on to become a successful director. Like I don't know if I can think of another.
I'm sure there probably is. I was never I'm not great at following who the directors are for most things unless I do that. But I'm sure there's got to be. Because like Tarantino, he just writes himself into his own things. He didn't have kind of like a movie thing. Did Bogart do anything? Maybe or something like that, but I don't know.
I mean, I know Charlie Chaplin, he was he was successful um in acting and then turned to directing.
I guess
But
Clint Eastwood. He would be one who potentially did it. Again,
oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, Clint Eastwood
he's the one that probably stands out most. A well known. There's a couple, but yeah, it's not as common, especially after they've had a crash like he did, like had some like a mental break type thing, where he is totally burnt out. Usually, they kind of then just slide off into an oblivion. But he made a comeback and as a great director, kind of during the same time while he's having his big old meltdown.
yeah, kind of a unique a unique sort of career path, but let's see. All right, the next one. The teaser trailer for the film has an almost entirely different cast than the one that ends up in the film. And I did not look this one up. I did not have the time to, but kind of want to makes me go back and see if I can find it later
Yeah.
and see if that's true or not. Because if that is true, that sounds hilarious. Let's see. Mel Gibson and Farhad Safina tried hard to find actors that match the archetype each character represented. For instance, Rudy Youngblood struck Gibson as the mythic archetype of a hero. Gibson saw that as necessary for people to identify with a foreign language film about an indigenous American culture in the 16th century.
No, I think he did very well with that because again, the people he got definitely were very expressive, and I think it really seems to be in their eyes. He really got a lot of people with the big eyes, like this the villager guy that he runs into at the beginning, and then kind of runs into again when they're captured or whatever. They just really focus on the eyes and facial expressions in this, so that's I guess something where they definitely get a lot into. So I could see them being a lot more intentional with who the people are.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, the way they do their expressions, it conveys a lot. Like if you didn't have that, this film would not work nearly as well.
Yeah, and I think that's also looking back on it. It's like they did do. It seems like a lot of facial zoom ins in it versus doing like kind of back zoomed out. Like it definitely seemed like a lot of it was much more focused, right, very up close on their faces.
Yeah, they wanted to see they wanted people to be able to see all the details, to get all those get the most make sure that their expressive performances were actually coming through to the audience. So it makes a lot of sense that they would do something like that. Yeah, and the main guy, this Rudy Youngblood guy, despite being totally unknown and speaking in a foreign language through the entirety of the film, like I really feel like he does kind of fit, like he has like that main character vibe, as the kids like to say.
Yeah, exactly. He is the main character.
Oh man. All right, let's see. This film is allegedly inspired by the text of the Popol Vuh, sometimes called the Mayan Bible, and Spanish missionary descriptions of the Maya. I thought that was interesting, but I have no way to verify that. Let's see. Here's another weird little detail. Apocalypto was the last R-rated movie released under the Walt Disney banner.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
obviously for violence, there's some nudity, but
yeah, so I guess this was distributed under, I can't remember if it was Icon or Buena Vista.
I want to say Icon,
but either way, it was. I know. I think The Passion was also distributed by Icon as well. But yeah, both of those labels though are just you know, basically directly owned by Disney. So it's kind of interesting that, like, yeah, because now you have Disney adjacent, like R-rated movies, like the Deadpool ones.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking exactly. Yeah,
but Yeah, as far as R-rated movies directly released by Walt Disney or by one of its, you know, subsidiaries, I don't, yeah, I can't think of any in particular. Which I always thought was kind of interesting how they really lean hard in that family friendliness kind of thing, but it's like they're kind of one of the most insidious like media companies out there.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely an interesting conundrum.
And then of course, Walt Disney himself, is like he's seen as like, the pioneer of, you know, magical children's entertainment, and it's like all the while he was not a fan of the Jews.
Different times, yeah. But yeah, it definitely was, yeah. He portrayed the happiest place on earth very well.
Let's see. So this one's interesting. The film released to theaters is the original film Mel Gibson created.
Hmm.
The MPAA did not request anything be cut in order to get it an R rating.
Hmm.
So that in and of itself is pretty cool, because like this is a violent film.
Mm-hmm, very.
And I know for a fact that The Passion had to be cut. Some stuff had to be cut out of The Passion to get it an R rating, because the original draft of the film got NC-17.
I wonder if it's because it's a lot more blunt force hitting. So it's like hitting and stuff. And obviously they got blood squirting and stuff like that. But I wonder if it's because it's more blunt force versus like a hack and slash or something like that. I wonder if
Maybe. But then there's the scene where they're literally like cut the hearts
yeah.
out
They
of
don't
people.
show it though.
Well,
The thing. So it's like they usually they were showing like the incision, which is like a horseshoe basically along the bottoms of the ribs or whatever, and then they just then show them with the heart. So it doesn't actually show too much of. They do the head though.
Yeah,
And the
they
head
do
even,
show him beheading.
Yeah, and to a point. I think they still hide a lot of it though. They're pretty good at they go to the other angle or whatever. Or they like show them hold the head and then they kind of go to the other angle of the feet, and so that way then the head obviously rolls down. So I think it does leave quite a bit more to the imagination than typically you would think.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, it's kind of funny how, now that you mention it, this film is kind of tasteful in a way, even though it's still ultra violent.
Yeah, even though there's so much blood, beheadings and ripping people's heart or cutting people's hearts out. It's like,
Yeah, I always thought though that the dream that the main character has in the beginning of the film is like totally foreshadowing the whole sacrifice thing.
yeah,
And I didn't realize it until like just a few minutes ago, basically, because he's got the cutout
yeah,
in his abdomen and he's holding his heart.
yeah. And again, the run. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, okay, this is our last one. The film covers many factors that historians believe led to the downfall of the Mesoamerican civilizations. The people were going through drought and famine, as shown with dying disease like crops and poor water supply. Plague diseases decimated the people, as shown with the little girl having the bubonic plague and the old man's laughing sickness, which came with uncontrollably shaking from eating human brains. The Spanish had also brought diseases the tribes had no natural immunity to: deforestation and the construction of limestone blocks. A tree almost falls on the captured group. Many trees were required to burn in order to create these lime blocks. By using so much trees, it drives the game away by taking away their habitat. The lime blocks were toxic to the workers, inevitably killing them, as shown with a worker throwing up blood. Overpopulation, showing children fighting for scraps of meat. Overpopulation would lead to more aggressive territorial wars. In an effort to increase territory, resources, slaves, and sacrifices. With the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors and missionaries, they brought force and their diseases in pursuit of land and gold. The Spanish went through the Mesoamerican tribes. Once reaching Texas, they were stopped in their tracks by the mighty and powerful Comanche. That's kind of an interesting little detail, kind of sums up kind of the things we were talking about.
Yeah, the tree falling thing was a little weird. There's like you hear the tree fall and they're just like walking along, or whatever, and the guy's like, "Hey, I'm walking here," type thing. It's like this giant tree falls like right over there. It's like I think guys, that's one thing that was interesting with the Mayan village was it's weird because like certain areas, like you said, the limestone quarry and all this stuff is like very organized, but then there's a lot of it too that's just kind of chaotic. I mean, I just like the one that stood out to me most was the dude plucking a chicken. He's just throwing feathers everywhere or whatever. It's like you think their stuff would be a little more organized than some of that stuff. It was just kind of weird because they have the dyes sections all organized, they have the blocks all organized, but then the other parts of the place were just like chaos. Like,
Yeah. And that's kind of interesting too, is like you can see through the film like how they brought kind of the diseases they were suffering from upon themselves. You know, you had like just like kids fighting for like, a scrap of some part of an animal that's not really identifiable. Um in the street, and then you have like this like mound of bodies just like sitting there decaying, like they didn't do anything. They didn't burn them, bury them, nothing.
yeah.
They just left them in piles.
Which I don't know if that's another underlying thing, just like with big cities, because that's always the thing with cities. You have to take care of sanitation and stuff like that, because otherwise it does breed disease.
Yeah.
It's like that's the problem with having people stacked on top of each other. It's like you got to put your waste somewhere.
Yeah.
So that again comes down to more organization and stuff like that. Which I don't know if maybe that was the thing was they got so focused on. I think that was part of the whole city walking scene was again trying to bring all those points which he was just talking about, kind of light and kind of a quick succession, which I think is probably why. Because again, it shows that that their focus was on the limestone and the dyes and all this stuff, that makes money, and not worrying about kind of everyday life stuff and that, which again kind of showed they weren't intentional with city planning and all that stuff. So
yeah. Yeah, overall, interesting film, and I'm glad I finally got to watch it.
yeah, it's definitely one that like I said, I chuck it up to kind of like when you start to forget about it, watch it again. It's like, but it's not something you can watch every weekend.
Yeah. All right. Well, if that's all we got for this film, then I think it's time for us to get out of here.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, Nick, for joining me on this two films episode. And thank you all, audience, for tuning in. And I guess tough times when civilization is crumbling all around you, just remember to Snarp Fangle on.